Hey everyone, welcome to my latest project, the Honda ATC250ES, also called the Big Red. This truly was a barn find for me on my vacation outside of Mumbai, where I managed to trade it in for a bottle of single malt, which is quite cool. But the ATC, or the all-terrain cycle, was Honda's spin-off on a utilitarian motorcycle for North America in the late 70s and up until the late 80s, when the American government found that the ATC was too dangerous because a lot of Americans were killing themselves and banned it. Fortnite has a great video if you want to have a look at it. The link's in the comments below. So ever since I committed to getting the Honda, I've been scouting the internet and I'm on various forums trying to get as much information as possible, but also sharing pictures of the ATC that I have, and people across the world have really scoffed at the condition of it and are quite surprised that I'm even considering restoring it, which I see as a challenge, and I can't wait to see this project through now. The ATC has been sitting out in the elements for over 15 years, and the sea breeze has definitely corroded a lot of the chassis all the way down to the insides. But all in all, I don't think this 250 is beyond salvageable. The carburetor turned out to be in fairly good shape, save a broken choke nut, whereas the removable headlight looked like it had never been used. Even the wiring behind it looked like it was brand new. The spark plug was seized inside the engine block, and we used a lot of WD-40 and a blowtorch to get it open. The internet is filled with stories of seized forks and jammed axles. However, the front end on this machine disassembled fairly easily. The rear, on the other hand, well, that's another story. A lot of WD-40, even more muscle, and the biggest hammer in the toolbox, and we still struggle quite a bit to get it apart. I think for me the biggest challenge was trying to get the rear end apart, especially the bevel drive and the rear hub, and it did take quite a bit of effort to do that. We used the blowtorch in multiple instances, the angle grinder some places. And my primary sort of focus was to get the rear end off without breaking anything on the bevel drive. And I think we did that quite successfully, especially since the rear drive was caked in years of mud, some melted paint and plastic, I think, which if you look closely at the bevel drive, you can see. And I think we managed to get it off without damaging it at all. So the previous owner had also mentioned to us that one of the reasons the ATC fell into a state of disrepair was because the wheels corroded and basically let the vehicle crumble to the ground. So this Big Red was sitting in the dirt with its chassis on the ground for the last 15 years. And when we flipped it over, it was quite evident what had happened. A lot of the chassis had rusted through and was being held together by just the tabs that hold the engine. So I decided to wire brush it down to the metal and make sure that we were able to sort of bring the chassis back to its original strength and rigidity, because this thing's capable of towing about 700 pounds, which is about 300 kilos. And I think part of the restoration was to be able to get it back to doing rugged work. So we used pipe in a lot of the sections where the frame was broken, and then reinforced it with 1/2 inch and 1 inch angle pieces. The racks were also in a pretty bad state, and having a new one shipped in from the US is just too expensive. So what I did was use box section, square box section pieces, cut them down to size, then split them in half, drill holes through them, and then weld nuts on, and put them back into their original spots. We also, of course, put pipes or change the pipes on the carriers to reinforce them. So I think it turned out pretty well. The last step before I send all of these parts off to paint is to make sure that these parts are thoroughly cleaned and degreased. And usually with projects like this, especially when there's a lot of oxidization and gunk, I send them off to the sandblaster. Sandblasting not only helps the painter start with a clean slate, but what I've found is usually at the end of it, you have an almost factory-like finish. And especially with projects like this, I found it to be really good. So it's something I really recommend you do if you're doing a restoration like this. The last thing I'm going to talk about on this video is the gas tank, which I see a lot of ATC owners in the US swap out for a plastic gas tank. And I don't see why, because I think good old-fashioned welding can plug the gaping holes that I have in this tank. And now that it's all cleaned up, I'm gonna weld it back together, save myself a few $100s, and let's see if it works. So that's all we have time for in this video, but if you want to follow this restoration project, please subscribe to my channel. And if you're wondering if I started the ATC before we took it apart, I actually did. And if you want to see how, you can tune into my next video. But until then, you can leave your comments in the section below.